The following episode contains descriptions of homicidal violence and child abuse. Listener discretion is advised.
There are nearly 20,000 murders annually in the United States.
Perhaps it's the weather, but the Pacific Northwest has become the notorious home of serial killers and bizarre crimes.
We're here to discuss those murders,
To try to understand the motives
respect and remember the victims.
and explore the humanity of it all.
I'm Emily Rowney,
And I'm Alisha Holland.
and this is Murder in the Rain.
Korena Roberts was a 26-year-old mother of two living in Beaverton, Oregon. She had a 10-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. Her two children were from two previous relationships, but she and her boyfriend of 5 years wanted a child of their own. In 2006, Korena had miscarried, and she and her boyfriend were devastated by the loss of their unborn baby. They waited, tried again, and in November of 2008, she was ecstatic to learn she was pregnant again. As the months went on, they were both taken aback to learn that not only was she pregnant, but it was twins, unexpectedly. Korena was not what you would call a woman with a healthy build, per se.
I see.
So her pregnancy, even though it was with twins, wasn't always the most noticeable. She would talk to anyone that she could about her bundles of joy that were on their way. The neighbors all knew she was expecting. There were times where she would kind of, from what I could find, make a scene a little bit, like maybe she'd be building baby furniture in the driveway, or carrying the stuff in from the car, all the baby stuff. So it was the focus of her life. As the due date was getting closer, she turned to the internet to find other moms and to also find necessities for the baby. Not only did this help in the financial department, but she was able to meet new people and make friends, even if they were only online.
So they were like trading, like, oh, here are my baby clothes and,
Yeah.
and cradle.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So she was a big fan of Craigslist, and there she came across Heather Snively. Heather lived close by, just, I don't know how far that would be from Beaverton to Tigard. So like,
15 minutes.
15-minute drive. One's an experienced mom and one's a new mom, so they really bonded pretty quickly. Heather was actually even seen by Korena's neighbors stopping off at Korena's home to drop off some goodies that they had found and some baby clothes that they were swapping, which everything kept referencing that, so I'm not sure if Korena just had baby clothes from her older kids that she was then giving Heather. Maybe they had different genders, but there was a lot of exchanging going on. All in all, they were both young mothers-to-be that were just really excited to find someone else in the area to share their hopes, fears, and excitement with. On Friday, June 3rd, 2009, Korena Roberts frantically called her boyfriend. Although she was nearing her due date, she had unexpectedly gone into labor at their home in Beaverton. He rushed home from work to find her sitting in their bathtub. She was covered in blood and holding a motionless blue baby boy. He attempted CPR, but to no avail. He quickly called 911 and informed them of the situation. Medics arrived on the scene and did all they could to resuscitate the baby while also tending to Korena's needs. Korena started to become agitated, informing medical staff that she was in fact pregnant with twins. So obviously the medical concern is still there, that she still has another baby to have.
Well, and I imagine as a EMT, that's probably not common.
Right.
So
exactly. So they rush her to the ER, and once there, the baby was pronounced dead. But the doctors began examining Korena and searching for a heartbeat for her second baby. It was then that they broke the news to her that they could not find a second heartbeat. It was Korena's reaction to this news that first raised the eyebrows of the medical staff at Providence Hospital. She was not showing what you would call a typical emotion as a mother that had just lost two babies. She was argumentative, she was demanding, and anything the doctors were presenting to her, she shot down. She was then taken to the exam room, and it was then that a doctor realized that she was not dilated whatsoever.
Wait a minute.
No way that she had in fact recently given birth.
So the baby in the bathtub was not hers.
So where did the baby come from?
Oh, boy.
Heather Snively and her fiance Chris Pops had moved to the Portland area because of a job opportunity Chris had received. Torn between Portland or Seattle, it was in fact Heather that convinced him to go for the Portland location as it was closer to some of his family. They had only been living in Portland for about 3 weeks when she met Korena on Craigslist. As with any young couple freshly moved across the country, they didn't have much, but they did have a fully stocked nursery, Even though they were sleeping with blankets on the floor, the baby had everything it could need. The crib, nursery, and toys were all set for their son's arrival in July. New to the area from Maryland, Heather and Chris relished their new environment. Chris is quoted as saying, "She had some of the best times of her life and just got to see things she never thought possible. In a 3-week span, we were at the mountains, we were in the snow, we were at the beach." Heather and Chris had met 3 years earlier. He was renting a room from Heather's dad, and the rest was history. Quote, "I gave Heather a kiss and a hug, and I told her how much I loved her, and I walked away. I came back, and I hugged her 3 more times. I couldn't stop kissing her. I just told her, 'I love you, and I can't wait to see you after work.' And when I got home and she wasn't there, part of me just felt lost. I just knew something was wrong." That's because something was. Heather didn't work, and her main focus had been finding baby items online. She should have been home. She should have answered her phone. But even after Chris called it more than 30 times in a few hours, he finally called the police once it got to be after 11 p.m. Back in the hospital, doctors continued to question Korena about the baby. She held fast to her story, that the baby was hers. Once the doctors informed the police of their concerns, officers made their way to Korena's Beaverton home. It was clear something violent had occurred. The bathroom was covered with blood spatter. Pools of blood and bloody footprints were scattered throughout. It didn't take long for police to follow the bloody trails to a pool of blood that had settled at the entrance of Korena's crawl space. They opened it up to find the crumpled, bloodied body of 21-year-old Heather Snively. But was it her baby that had died in Korena's arms? I mean, I don't know that I need to even say spoiler alert. But maybe spoiler alert.
Just in case you're really not
In case you're not following the story and we're just background noise at this point. To everyone's shock and horror, a few days later, the autopsy confirmed Heather's family and friends' worst fears. That she had been murdered and her 7-month-old son was taken from her uterus, premature and stillborn. The autopsy found she had been bludgeoned and beaten somewhere between 15 and 30 times with a metal-tipped collapsible baton before a box cutter was taken to her abdomen, cutting her open and removing her baby from her body.
Did the baby die because of what she did to the mother?
That's a really good question that I don't think they know the answer to. All they knew is it was stillborn because it never took in air.
Okay. I'm guessing that the trauma was pretty severe.
That I would think, because 7 months, you're kind of in a safe window per se. But yeah, if you're getting beaten while pregnant.
Did they do an autopsy on, did they say the fetus autopsy?
I believe so, but I don't think there were any wounds.
Like cut marks or
Right.
anything? Okay.
I think it was more just that all they really got from it was that it was stillborn.
Yeah, so it's stillborn and unborn, I guess.
Correct. Yes. The autopsy on Heather also found hair and some skin under her nails. She was covered in defensive wounds and even had a bite mark on her elbow. She fought really hard for her own life and the life of her son, John Stephen. It was 2 a.m. when Chris Pops was informed that Heather's body had been found. Once all of the details came to light, the story unfolded. Korena felt her only identity was that of a mother. Not only was it her identity, but she knew it was the only way she could keep her current boyfriend from leaving her. He was very vocal about his desire for children, and he was running out of patience. Korena and her boyfriend, which, I mean, what a great guy, right?
Disgusting.
I don't like you enough to stick around, but I will make another human with you. It's great. Korena and her boyfriend had tried for years to get pregnant on their own, but there was one small detail that she had forgot to mention to him. After her second child, she had had her tubes tied.
Oh my God.
There had never been a miscarriage, and there was never a pregnancy, let alone that of twins. Once she realized that he was getting more frustrated, she turned to the internet to find other moms-to-be that were looking for friends and an exchange of baby clothes.
Oh, so premeditated.
That was where Heather came along. On the day of June 5th, Korena and Heather had gone shopping and stopped at Korena's house to drop off some of the items they had found. Being 7 months pregnant, Heather desperately needed the restroom. As she finished up, Korena burst into the bathroom door and had a baton that she had purchased, the collapsible metal-tipped baton, and began beating Heather to death. Whether she was unconscious and slowly dying or had already died, I was not able to find. But that was when the situation went from unbelievable to unimaginable. Korena pulled out a box cutter and performed an in-home surgery in the bathroom, removing the 7-month-old boy from his mother. At that point, she either didn't realize that the trauma of her attack or the premature delivery would lead to his death, but she obviously didn't understand the ramifications of what she was doing. Although she had premeditated the attack, obviously, and finding a victim, it didn't appear that she had thought through her plan. In a panic, she dragged the body of Heather Snively to her crawl space and returned to the bathroom, where she got into the tub and held the baby before calling her boyfriend for help. So part of me wonders why she even held on to the baby. Like, the baby was not born alive. It's not like the baby passed away in her arms. Why not, if you're that deranged and you're that far gone, why not just hide both the bodies, deal with them later, and find another victim?
While I agree, I think there's some psychotic break happening here.
Clearly.
That maybe she was still identifying it as her baby.
And then it gets into like, is this a form of Munchausen?
Well, Munchausen is on yourself, so it would be Munchausen by proxy. Yes.
But a form of like, perhaps. I'm going to keep this baby now because now my baby died and I got so much attention last time when I had a miscarriage.
It's almost like you're adapting to the situation. It kind of could.
Yeah. It didn't take long for officers and prosecutors to put the pieces together. Originally charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of murder, and 2 counts of first-degree robbery, John Stephen, the baby, being the robbed item. In a plea deal, Korena pled guilty to 1 count of aggravated murder and agreed to life in prison without the possibility of parole in October of 2010. Now, there is actually quite a bit of anger and frustration surrounding this case because of the robbery aspect of the charges. Because it was found in the autopsy that John Stephen had not yet taken a breath, they could not charge Korena with homicide. Some senators attempted, and the senators were from both sides of the aisle, they attempted to pass a law to change that. Because Oregon has really strong abortion protection laws, they were unsuccessful. So I don't want our show to be political or divisive.
But it might get a little.
It is kind of shocking that they weren't able to pass a law to protect a baby and or fetus in this scenario, because it's obviously very, very different than an abortion.
It is. And I think there is a law, and a lot of states pass it, where if there's an act of violence committed against a mother and the baby dies because of it, it's fetal homicide. Right. But Oregon is not one of those states because of how strongly we feel about abortion.
Yeah, and then it gets to be a very blurred line because some people obviously see any fetal anything to be under the same umbrella.
Taken a breath,
had the baby taken a breath, it would have been
born?
Yes.
Okay.
And at 7 months, it was very possible, but again, it's also not known if it was because of the physical attack that led to John Stephen passing, or if he just didn't have a chance
sorry.
Okay,
here's the thing. I get that she's in jail. She's not getting out. No parole means you're not getting out. That's great. But so many people would be angered by that. Like, a robbery? Come on.
Oh, yeah.
They're trying to give her whatever they can, I guess, but that's just not enough for me.
Yeah. And, it's pretty amazing how the family handled all of that. Amazingly, both Heather's family and fiance have forgiven their daughter and grandson's murderer. When asked about the killer, Chris simply said, "God bless your soul. I have no guilt or anger towards her at all. She's going to have her day in court, and she's going to get prosecuted to the fullest extent." That is some pretty serious forgiveness towards someone that took away basically your entire family. Although quite rare, cases like Heather Snively's are not totally unheard of. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they recorded 18 cases of fetal abduction in the United States between 1983 and 2015. One of those cases was actually right around the same time. It was in 2008, just up north from us in Kennewick, Washington. I'm going to attempt this name, but this person's actually garbage, so I'm not too worried about saying it correctly.
Give it a go.
Finningshai Shisuvan Sinavag is her name. She was 23 years old at the time when she came across a very pregnant Araceli Camacho Gomez, who was 27 years old. They actually met at a bus station, and Araceli did not speak English, so her 11-year-old son at the time translated for Araceli and Finningshai. And again, it was kind of the same thing of let's exchange clothes, let's talk about having babies. She was pretending to be pregnant. The son gave the phone number. They met up at a park, and it's actually pretty horrendous and graphic, which is why we didn't go into that one, but she tied Arceli up, like hog-tied, arms and legs, and stabbed her to death in the park and abducted her baby. The difference being that her baby actually lived. And again, the woman called the police for help in an attempt to pass the baby off as her own. And very quickly it became apparent that she was lying and it was not her baby.
Because she was, 97 or something?
No, but there was very much a different racial situation going on, and she did not present like someone that had just had a baby. And again, in 2010, the same year as Korena Roberts' case, she was given life in prison without parole. And it's my understanding that the boy that survived, is actually living with his birth family. If you or anyone you know is suffering from a mental health crisis, please call 1-800-950-6264. If you are suffering from postpartum depression, please call 1-800-944-4773. Murder in the Rain had the privilege of interviewing the two detectives that worked firsthand on this case. After finding the story of Korena and Heather on an episode of Deadly Women, I reached out to Detectives Murray Rao and Andy Hayes of the Washington County Sheriff's Office. Detective Murray Rao was with the Washington County Sheriff's Office for 26 years. Starting out in patrol, he worked his way up to the Financial Crimes Division before becoming a detective with the Violent Crimes Unit in 2003. He retired in 2018, and although he's retired, he's currently a truancy officer. Detective Andy Hayes has been with the Washington County Sheriff's Office for 24 years. Patrolling for 10, 8 of which were with his canine partner Ranger, he moved up to corporal in 2004 before gaining detective status. After 6 months in the Child Abuse Division, he was promoted to Major Crimes. Detective Hayes has only 2 years left before retirement. Listener discretion. With Josh and Emily both out of town at the time of this interview, I brought my mom along with me in case I forgot to ask any important questions. While it was super helpful and I love her to death, she can be a reactive lady, hence the gasps that you may hear in the background. Enjoy! So how did when Korena Roberts was in the hospital and when all this kind of went down, what were your guys' roles in the case?
The night that it happened, I think we were both off duty when we finally got called. It was before we had finished our shift when it started rolling, but we didn't get called until later. That afternoon, about 2:42 in the afternoon, Jan Shubin, who was Korena's long-term boyfriend, is that a good way?
Yeah, yeah, live-in.
Called 911, and I can tell you what the call said. It said a female, 27 years old, was conscious. She was 9 months pregnant, having multiple birth twins. A baby was showing. The first baby was delivered but not breathing. And Jan wasn't home yet when he first called in, I don't think he was home yet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so he starts driving erratically from work to get home to be with.
Because she had called him,
yes,
right, to say that
correct,
what happened.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so he starts driving erratically on his way home to be with her. And what was kind of unique about this case is one of our deputies happened to be driving through the neighborhood by their house and sees this guy driving like crazy, and tried to turn around to see if he could stop him because he was driving so wild and erratic. And when he turned down the street that they happen to live on, he sees this matching vehicle because he didn't get the plate. Mm-hmm. But he sees a vehicle that looks like the one that was driving crazy, but he's not positive.
And now it's
parked. And he sees a guy going in the house, and he's like, I didn't get a good enough look. But so timing-wise, we knew that what Jan was telling us was matching up with what one of our own deputies had actually seen. So
He had a great witness.
Right.
and the case starts out with, like any case, it's a medical call. Mm-hmm. So, police aren't like right at the forefront of this one. It's going to be, fire, and then it's going to be, your ambulance teams are probably going to be getting there simultaneously, and they're acting on, their the information that they have.
Right.
And, it's to help people. And so there's a lady that's had a child, it's not breathing, she's supposed to be pregnant with twins, this isn't the place to do this.
There's no reason to suspect anything else.
Right. St. Vincent's Hospital's a mile away. It's right up the road. Let's go. And they left with such haste that they actually forgot quite a bit of their medical equipment in the house. So they had to go back later and get it. But that just shows you how fast they were trying to get things going. And I think Jan called at 2:42. And by 2:56, 14 minutes later, they were arriving at the hospital with
Wow.
her. It was that fast.
That's really fast.
Yeah.
Fire got there within 3 minutes, and medical was there just a couple minutes after that. So they were there
That's
pretty
impressive.
quick. What made it, I guess, kind of frantic for EMS and for fire guys was that when Jan made the 911 call, the dispatcher was giving him CPR directions.
Right.
And he's holding what he believes is his newborn son that's in distress, and he's believing also that his girlfriend is having another
second baby, right.
in the bathtub, and she's in the bathtub basically naked except for a bra.
Right.
She's covered in blood, and she's holding the baby when he first gets there, and she's basically under the shower and getting clean, and of course he's frantic, and he thinks this other baby is going to be born, and maybe that one's going to have problems too. So
Right.
by the time fire gets there, it's quite a
There's
chaotic scene. And
extreme
they're
urgency.
They're coming in like, let's get her out of here as fast as we possibly can. They just basically took what they had as far as like, here's not just that it's a medical call, but this is like a really bad one, and forget what's going on at the scene. Just get
Right.
them up there and help these
And
babies.
blood makes sense.
Yeah.
She just had a baby and
Right.
at home, so obviously it's going to be messy and let's
Right.
go. Like, it all makes sense.
Of course, later on, that kind of was like you see the scene and you go, how in the heck did they not know that how bad it was?
So when she got to the hospital, of course, some of these things are clearly before we, or even on our way there.
Right.
She got to the hospital, and immediately the nurses are like, "We need to be prepared to deliver a second kid, successfully." And right away, they're noticing that there's something not right. There's no signs that she's had a child.
And I had read also that her behavior was pretty, not the norm, not what they expected for a woman that had delivered, let alone her.
Yeah, she started covering her head with a sheet. And
In the ambulance, yeah, when she was in the ambulance, they were trying to get her to come out, and she just basically kept a blanket up over her and wasn't really answering questions the way a normal expectant mother would be.
Or a mother that just lost her child
right
after giving birth.
As
Lots
a
of boxes to
homicide-
check.
I'm sorry, yeah, but as a homicide detective, you learn to not, think too much into what people do necessarily. You keep an open mind, and we can all say there's kind of a right way and a wrong way to generally react to certain things, but people do react differently to different things.
Right.
But not that bad, not
Right.
that much. There are some things that are just things that you think there's definitely something wrong. You can't put your finger on what it is right away.
Just
until
red
you get more
flags.
information, but yeah, there's red flags, and we're trying to figure out what was going on with the second baby, and they called. I believe it was an on-call doctor from another wing to come over to possibly have to deliver this other
Right.
baby. They didn't have somebody right there ready to go because of this being an emergency. But when the RN got there and was trying to assess what was happening, Corinna was just basically wondering, why am I being treated this way? I'm having a baby. This is not the way this is supposed to happen.
And being like argumentative.
Yeah.
Right.
She got up at one point and went out into the hallway and was kind of sitting down in the hallway and saying, bring me a sandwich, and just acting very strange.
Red flag.
Right. And
Wow.
making it all about, how to treat her. When the nurses and a doctor came in to try to assess the other baby, they hooked her up to a fetal heart monitor and weren't getting anything. And so the doctor was basically saying, I need to do an exam, a physical exam. And Corinna didn't want to submit to an exam. at all. She didn't want anyone touching her, and she again was covering herself up with blankets and just acting very strange. Well, that doctor was basically really pivotal in this whole thing. She was, to me, a hero in this investigation because she knew something, not necessarily that she was crazy, but something was
wrong.
Going on. Something's wrong. So she called an associate of hers who's a psychologist or psychiatrist. I think he's a psychiatrist from the psych ward, another part of the hospital. And she basically just asked him to come down and monitor in the room while she was doing the
this
things that she had
erratic
to do.
behavior.
Right, to have him observe a little bit. And so she did that, and that became a big issue later on as well. And she was kind of thinking like us, the way that we would think about things and what's going to be important later. She realized she needed someone to be there to kind of see what I'm seeing and try to help assess what was happening with her.
And good for her for pushing and seeing those red flags and being like, no, something more needs to happen, instead of, okay,
Right.
we'll deal with this later, like really sticking to her guns.
As she started questioning her more and realizing she wasn't really getting cooperation with Korena, the doctor realized that she needed to try to get some more information about there's got to be, if she's not a real mom at this point, then there must be a mother out there somewhere who just gave birth. She's claiming to be having twins, but there's no evidence of a second child. I think she finally did submit to an exam, and the doctor said, you have not had a baby in at least 6 months.
Right.
Just to be on the safe side, you haven't had a baby in at least 6 months. And that's when she realized we need to start looking for wherever this mom is that really did give birth to this baby. And there'd been some mention in her conversation with Korena that Korena had some midwife training of some kind. Either she was training to be a midwife, or as far as she knew, she was a midwife. And so she started kind of thinking in her head, well, maybe she helped birth a baby for someone kind of under the radar, someone who didn't want anyone to know. And so she started asking some more questions and ended up going out to where the boyfriend, where Jan was out, and there was a couple of deputies of ours that were up there by then. And the doctor was basically making sure that she was loud enough and asking her questions to Jan so that the deputies would overhear and hopefully get the signal that something's wrong. And they certainly can't, they're, because of Privacy Act,
Right.
they can't really just go out and start giving a bunch of information about this patient. But she knew she had a duty to that baby and maybe a mom out there somewhere. This, she's kind of stuck. So she was talking with Jan and basically asking him, is there someone that you have at your house that maybe is a house guest, or do you have a friend over? Is there anyone else staying at your house? And he's like, no, nothing like that. And well, could somebody be maybe in another room and you didn't know they were there when you went home? Do you have a basement or any other rooms besides, where someone would have seen,
Right.
And he's like, no, but I don't really have a basement. I just have a crawl space. And the deputies were overhearing this, and they started realizing, maybe we should have someone go by the house and do a check.
Well, and Dr. Moore called Korena's mom during her questioning. She called Korena's mom to get some pregnancy history from the mother, thinking that might help. And Korena's mom said it was a miracle that Korena was having a baby because she'd had her tubes tied like 4 or 5 years earlier at
Right.
OHSU. So
After her second child, she had had
and her mom said it's actually a double miracle because she had been pregnant a couple years earlier, but the child was stillborn. So, which wasn't, obviously
didn't
wasn't
exist,
true,
yeah.
but that's kind of how things are playing out. And the doctor was really zeroing in on, okay, things just they're not adding up, not at all. So, she's like, clearly somebody just had a baby, but it wasn't you.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, as I was saying earlier, when the doctor was talking to Jan, he told the doctor that he'd gotten home around 11 a.m. that day for lunch, and that, Korena made him like a grilled cheese sandwich or something else, and things were normal. Things were pretty much just happy-go-lucky, and then she called again at 2:30 in the afternoon for him to come home. And so when he got the call, he was, pretty close to leaving for work anyways. And she called him and said, "You need to get over here right now. I need you here. I need you right away." And that's the reason why he was driving so erratically when the deputy saw him. And that's when we realized it started to click that was the time when the officer saw him driving the way he was.
Right.
He was trying to get home because he knew something was wrong with Korena and his baby. And of course, when you have a situation like that, you've got to wonder, how much does he know? How much does the boyfriend know? How is he complicit? Is he
saying, no, we don't have anyone at our house, when really they have someone in their house?
Right. So you're certainly suspicious of both parties when, she's saying there's nothing weird going on, and he's saying nothing weird is going on, and you're like, okay, something
weird is going on.
Yeah. She was basically being held in the hospital by that point. They were not going to let her leave. They knew something was wrong enough. Security was watching her and that sort of thing. And when the other doctor, the psychiatrist, was there, he observed her for about an hour and a half, which was kind of important later on in trying to figure out whether she was mentally ill or kind of what her state of mind was at the time. That really kind of nipped that question in the bud after he was interviewed and gave some testimony about it at a preliminary hearing. And it really stopped kind of a long, drawn-out process that can happen in cases like this where someone ends up at the state hospital for a long time. And this became a little more clear-cut right from the get-go.
Were there particular things that he documented that helped clear that for? I'm kind of picturing, as you're saying this, like, the Jodi Arias case where she's in the room by herself and doing handstands and all of that stuff. Were there things that he observed that really sealed that for you guys?
We got like triple lucky because he had a background.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it was in false pregnancies or something like that, but
it was super specific.
Here's somebody. Here's like this really weird event. And here's a specialist in the same exact field at the same place at the same time. Like, what are the odds? So yeah, it was like we got the best person we could possibly have talking to her at the hospital.
And of course, we didn't realize, at least I didn't, when this case happened, how often this phenomenon of babies being taken from the womb, or babies being taken immediately when they're born, that sort of thing, or moms being kidnapped and then babies being taken. I didn't realize how often that really happens.
There was one that same year up
you just don't hear
in
about
Washington.
And so I just thought it was really, really, just really wild when I heard it. And once you realize what was really happening, it was like, whoa, this is a big deal. And we were wanting to talk to anyone and everyone we possibly could talk to that might know them, and to try to really figure out what is Jan's knowledge of this, what was Korena's, what was her end game, what exactly was she trying to do, and so you already have her, kind of in custody, and she's not under arrest at the time, but she's definitely being held there, and so it's not like we're looking for necessarily a whodunit type case. But you have to piece together this just weird jigsaw puzzle that doesn't look like it belongs together.
Right. How were you guys able to hold her at the hospital, since she obviously hadn't given birth? How did that work? That
you could start out even with the simple theory of kidnapping. It's like, okay, she's not the mom,
right?
So there's a mom somewhere who doesn't have their child. We just kind of like that's one of the first things that came to the forefront.
Okay.
This is somebody's child, not hers.
Yours.
Yeah. And the hospital, they're being very diplomatic as they work through this. I mean, they're into it for probably, about an hour and a half. And, our deputies then are starting to talk to Jan about getting consent to go back and look in the house. And, maybe something got missed, when first responders were there initially. And he's fine with that. So it's like 20 minutes or so to 6, and the deputies are back out at the house, inside the house, and they're starting to look around, and they're starting to see, evidence and things like that aren't adding up, and Eventually, somebody notices that there appears to be some kind of like blood smearing across the floor, and there was a hardwood floor, but they had a really nice big area rug. And so once they started to move the rug, it keeps going across the floor, and they keep moving the rug, and then here's the door to the crawl space. And so when they removed the door to the crawl space, that's when they found Heather. When they found Heather in the crawl space, everything just kind of slowed down. That's when we got called. It was about that point in time. Part of it is, we had to apply for search warrants now to process the crime scene, because we had no idea how long it was going to be. At that point, it's like we don't really need to leave Korena at the hospital anymore because there's no medical emergency anymore. She can be taken back to the sheriff's office, and that's when things kind of start to kind of come, kind of slowly you're kind of starting to take information in, and we find out that Korena and Jan have been together for about 5 years at this point. We learned that Korena already had 2 children of her own. She had a daughter that was 10 at the time and a son that was 6. The whole concept of, in your mind, like maybe she's never had children, and but that wasn't the case. She actually had children. So, and her mom had stated that she couldn't have more. So I think, did you interview Jan?
Yeah. So we interviewed Jan extensively. He was, at first we thought either he is just a really, really good liar, or he really does not know a whole lot about what's really happening here. He said that, like in 2008, November of 2008, Korena had told Jan that she was pregnant and was going to have twins. We didn't find out till later, but he thought that's pretty strange because he had a vasectomy also.
Oh, I had not read that anywhere.
Yeah.
That would be a little strange, huh?
Right, but he thought, it's just one of those miracles. It's just, life finds a way sometimes. And
now
he
I had
figured it had
read,
to be something
in
like
reading up, I had read that he had been pushing for her to get pregnant, so that that it was a big deal to him to have a child with her, and that he was really kind of gung ho, and that was kind of lit a fire under her a little bit for this whole,
It kind of was, and she gained weight appropriately, like in the months to follow.
So did he want kids, but then didn't tell her that?
Well, he was surprised that was even in the cards for him. He's not knowing that she's already had a hysterectomy, and she doesn't know that he's already had a vasectomy. So it's really not in the cards for either of them.
Right.
And like Andy was saying, he was such a nice kid, but there was like maybe I don't know what the right word is, maybe a missing level of sophistication. He started talking, and if you were listening to what he was saying very closely and, kind of thinking it through rationally, it's like, okay, he always goes with her to her appointments, but he's like never met her doctor. And the only time that she asked him to go with her into the hospital, or he insisted, she told him, well, they've mixed up the dates. We're just here on the wrong date. I need to come back, tomorrow. So he's taking her. He's waiting in the car. He's not right there, but he thinks that these visits are productive.
One of the things we realized pretty early on with Jan, as far as level of sophistication was concerned, and
Such
how
a nice way
how
to
he
say
could,
that. I really want to borrow that from now on.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to say there was something wrong with him mentally or anything,
Right,
but
just a simple guy.
without knowing him very much. But we kind of got some of his history, and he told me that he spent, I don't know how long, but some of his childhood in Russia. He was born in Russia, lived in a kind of a poor environment over there, didn't have the greatest of medical care, and something happened to him as a child that caused some kind of a neurological defect, possibly from some illness that he had. His brain went without oxygen for a little while. It also caused him to have a limp. He had a little bit of a limp in his gait. So he had some level of brain damage from his childhood. And so he was just not, as far as sophistication goes, he wasn't really thinking ahead about how long she's been pregnant.
Right.
And if he misses an appointment, he wasn't really thinking, why is she hiding that? He really wasn't putting two and two together.
Right.
He's just kind of going along with it. And as you said, he was excited about having a baby of his own. He's already basically a father to the other two kids, but
Right.
he wanted to raise a kid of his own. And we also kind of pieced together from other people in the case that this pregnancy was kind of a way to keep the relationship alive.
Right.
That this was a kind of an anchor for both of them to kind of stick it out. And they had had some problems.
Always
you
a
know,
healthy
with
way to
just-
go about it.
Right.
Even her friends, until you like called him and talked to him or went out and met him in person and talked to him, the common theme was, gosh, that's really interesting, because now that I think back, she told me she was pregnant in June, so she should have had, the baby in March,
Right.
but then it didn't, and they're like, now it's all of a sudden like they're doing the calendar in their head,
Right.
and it's clearly not.
But at the time, it's your friend, and you're
Right.
not going to go, didn't you say you were this far along?
Exactly.
Oh, I must have misheard you.
Right.
Or, yeah,
And so
you're not
no
gonna
one
question your
was
friend.
thinking about it that way, and until this happened, and then when we're interviewing them, then you can see the light coming
Right.
on above their head. So one of the things that I think Jan talked about it, and it was overheard by some of the medical staff, that when he was talking to Corinna privately at the hospital before the police really got involved, she said, "I've done something really bad." And he said that somebody from the hospital walked in the room, like as bad came out of her mouth, and so she never
Elaborated.
elaborated on what it was. And then he started talking about, started to talk about the fact that Corinna was very interested in Craigslist at the time, buying, selling, trading, all stuff related to babies, whether it was clothing or toys or rockers or, you name it. So he said that he thought that it was possible that might be how Corinna had met this
Heather.
other person. Yes, being Heather. So, yeah.
Jan talked about in the interview, he was saying that Corinna told him that she was training to be a midwife, was taking classes at PCC because he had basically witnessed her watching YouTube videos about births and
and that was her
home
excuse.
birthing and that sort of thing, and so that was what she basically told him as an explanation, and then that's how it got relayed from him to the staff at the hospital, and that's how the doctor finally heard that she's supposedly a midwife or trained to be a midwife,
Right.
and
And I'm going to
So-
guess she wasn't actually taking classes.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm a detective now.
Yeah.
So I was just about done with the search warrant application that night so that we could go search the house. And a call came into dispatch from the Tigard Police Department. And there was a gentleman by the name of Chris Pop at the Tigard Police Station wanted to report that his pregnant girlfriend was missing. And so all of us were just like,
This is it.
this
Yeah.
this is where it's going to start, part two. And so we sent a detective down there to talk to him, and he started to give the clothing description, which matched what we already knew. And so it was like, yeah, we know where she's at. So it was, kind of a blessing, but not at the same time. It was nice that we found him so quickly, but
Right.
with horrible news.
Right.
So
We didn't mention earlier that when the officers that went to the scene and found Heather, they basically locked it down and left, went outside and guarded the place. So they weren't in there milling around. The crime scene was locked down.
Oh, so
And-
as soon as they realized this is
Right.
a homicide scene,
Right.
done, calling you guys. Okay.
So no one
That's
was
what- that's what I mean,
checking,
everything just stopped.
Yeah.
Right.
Everything just kind of went into slow motion.
Right.
So.
because we needed a warrant to be able to enter the house and start
Okay.
looking for things. And in a situation like that, or any scene like that, no one does anything until the medical examiner gets there. It's their scene, once they give us the blessing to go in and look around. And so we couldn't even really check for her ID or purse or any of that stuff. We couldn't look around for other personal effects in the house. So we really didn't know who we were dealing with yet. And that's why it was taking so long at night to trying to get as much as we could from Jan, and then while this is all going on, Korena is in another interview room, just basically laying, lifeless on the couch, just laying there while deputies keeping an eye on her, and she's a few times just kind of making weird sounds. And
at that point, are you guys like attempting to interview her?
No,
or
not
you're
at
just
that
kind
point.
of letting it be until you know what you're going to be asking about, basically?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And she ended up, declining to talk to us anyways. She just wanted to get booked by that time. By the time we were done talking to Jan and getting this search warrant done, she was pretty much ready to go. She wouldn't say anything.
Tested enough at the hospital, and it wasn't working. So
Right.
it's like I'm not going to sell this.
Right.
So
Right.
On a kind of a side note, it was from a detective standpoint. It's good to know who your coworkers are and know a little bit about the teammates that you have, because we probably would have made a different decision in the person that we sent to make the notification, because the other major crimes detective at the time was a Beaverton detective that his wife had just given birth to triplets. I think it was either twins or triplets.
I think it was
But
triplets,
multiple,
but
yeah.
either she was.
About to.
I think she was about to give birth. Yeah.
So it's like we probably kind of picked the wrong detective to go and do that. So it's just that that human side of it on our side, and how it affects other officers. I mean, I think it took a while for him to kind of get over that, because and we all do it. We all think of people that are in this situation, and kind of how it reflects on it's a mirror of ourselves, really. We think of our own kids when they're that age, or so it was kind of tough on him.
And then we start gleaning information from Chris now that he's thinking this through, and he talked about hearing on the news that something had happened, was kind of putting things together.
Right.
And he said that he thought it was possible that Heather had met Korena on Craigslist around the 2nd of June, so like a week or so before. And then he kind of knew what Korena drove, like for a vehicle. And he said that he knew that Heather had got some baby clothing from her already, and a stroller and a car seat. So
they had hung out. I've seen and heard conflicting things where they had spent time, or they didn't really spend time in person.
They had, yeah.
On a few occasions.
Okay, fast friends, and I know Heather was new to town anyway, so I'm sure finding a fellow pregnant friend,
Right.
Right. So that night, while Chris was still being interviewed, and we were basically taking Korena down to get lodged at the county jail, when she got where it was in pretty good light, we could see that she had this kind of just a long linear scratch. Looked very much like a fingernail scratch right along her neck. It was probably a good 3 to 4 inches long. And it looked like she'd been in a fight. It's our first kind of physical evidence on her that we saw that was interesting. We ended up swabbing that for DNA. When we were walking her down the hallway, she was carrying this blanket and just kind of covering herself and just really acting strange. And when she realized that we were about to use a swab to swab that injury, that's kind of when I realized she's more with it than I thought she was, as far as her mental kind of state. Because when she saw the swab, she started rubbing her neck with the blanket, trying to rub whatever was there out. So she's crazy. She's crazy like a fox.
Right.
And I thought, yeah, she's in there. She knows what's going on here. She's not so out of it. She's not, she's playing this game with us. And then we started noticing, on her hands, she's got a lot of scratches and that sort of thing. And
she had, Heather had bites on her.
Yes.
But Korena didn't, right? Okay.
Right. We would find out later after the autopsy. Like when we went to the autopsy the next day, the people in the jail, while we were going to the autopsy, people were dealing with her in the jail later in the morning when they were booking her in and that sort of thing. They reported to us saying that they saw a lot of bruises on Korena's or on her body while she was getting changed out by the staff. They're like, "Hey guys, she's clearly been in some kind of fight. She had bruises like all over her arms, on her breasts. I think she may have even had a bite mark herself. I can't remember for sure. But we, at the same time, we're at the autopsy, and we're starting to see signs at the autopsy, or they're very obvious once they got clothing off of Heather, that she had been in a absolute fight for her life, severe fight for her life. She was fighting literally tooth and nail.
She had long, thick hair, and they found a pair of eyeglasses, and the lens from one of the eyeglasses was missing. It had been knocked out. So we're like, well, when they're processing the house, that's something that we're going to want to look for because it's not here.
Right.
So not to say that it couldn't have fallen out between the house and the hospital, and who knows where it's at, but we knew we didn't have it done at the crime lab, or the medical examiner's office. But yeah, as time went by, those injuries started to bruise up, and so we did another search warrant to photograph her in a nude state so that we could document every injury that's there, and they were really starting to become more evident at that point. So it was easier to document them. So
did you guys ever find the lens?
we did. It was underneath the bed in one of the spare bedrooms of the house.
Really?
So yeah, when we were walking around and they're looking around, there was something that just catches your eye underneath the bed. It's like, what is that?
Right.
And start looking a little bit closer. It's like, hey, there's the lens to the to those eyeglasses, and that was the same room where we found the baton that was used. It was a very simple baton, and it was similar to the police batons, but it was different. Shape and size, it was about the same, but in the police batons, it's 3 rigid sections that expand out, and this one had 1 rigid section, and then it had the next, or maybe 2 rigid sections, and the last one was like a wound up really tight coil spring with like a little piece of steel on the tip.
Something you could surmise from Heather's injuries to her head specifically was the way that this baton was actually completely bending and wrapping around the top of her head, and then leaving that injury he was talking about kind of at the end of it, splitting the skin. And you kind of surmise how it happened. You could see a lot of these injuries were random, but then you could see in one area in the back of her head had multiple strikes, which was kind of the first clue for me that she had to have been subdued at some point where she was no longer able to fight, and the injuries were being concentrated in one area. So, which to me, I figured she's no longer a moving target,
right?
And she was able to really
face down,
really knock her out by that point. And the scene, as bloody as it was, there was also a lot of kind of chaos to it because one of Heather's shoes was in the same room where we found the baton in the lens. You could tell there had been a scuffle there. And that baton, Jan had told us that baton normally was up on the top of the wood frame above the door, the trim above the bedroom door. And the hallway that separates the bedrooms and the bathroom where the actual cutting occurred, you could tell that this all must have started kind of right there, centralized in the hallway.
Okay.
And for some reason, she got Heather back in that area, maybe having her look at a lot of the kids' clothing and stuff, baby stuff that she had stored in the one room. And that's where the attack started, and it just went on for quite a while. You can tell that she really, really fought. And then finally she subdued her in the bathroom and performed the cutting and everything right there. And then when it was done, she dragged her out. And one of the things at that time that we were looking for, based on what we saw with the cutting, she was basically cut from hip to hip. Jan told us that became very significant was in his job, he used a box cutter all the time, and he had just purchased a small container of replacement blades that he kept in his little toolkit in his car. And it's the little trapezoid-shaped blades that you can use to replace refills. He counted and saw that the brand new pack that he had was missing one. There was 9 blades in it. One was missing. He just bought the brand new pack. So we pretty much realized we're looking for a blade from a razor, from a cutter, and we could not locate it. But the next day, after, we had the crime scene for several days, but after the next day, the criminalists were looking again. There was where this blood had pooled and started to dry. They ended up finding the blade was laying flat on the linoleum of the bathroom.
Oh, and then the blood had pooled on top.
Yeah, the blood had pooled on top, but as it dried and it started to kind of pull away from the metal, the outline of it was there. They ended up finding it, and sure enough, it was the blade from Jan's kit. And she used a rag.
I was going to say she didn't even have it like
that's
in
how she
an
didn't
actual.
cut herself. She used a rag as a handle to make the cut.
I find all of that so intriguing, what she did with Heather's body. And I mean, every step of this, it's like, it's so thought out,
right.
To watch these YouTube videos and I'm pregnant and I'm going to find someone. It's like so methodical. And then when it comes to the actual act, it is chaotic and fumbled and no thought whatsoever. And
right.
it's so, I don't know what, just doesn't make sense. Why put all that thought, effort, and energy into that part of it and then nothing into that?
I would have to say, from my experience, and probably from every documentary I've seen, every training I've been to, people put so much thought into what they're going to do when they kill someone. They don't think about what they're going to do when it's done.
Right.
And when it is done, and whether it's rage or whatever their ends, whatever their end game is, they don't put much thought into how they're going to cover it up, or body's heavier than you think it is.
Because it goes from fantasy to reality.
Right,
here's this idea I have, and oh wait, this is real life
and
now.
that's where they screw up. We started getting this theme that she's smarter than we think, and she's not crazy, quote unquote crazy, that everyone would think just by seeing a picture of her.
Yeah, that picture is
see a picture and she's got to be crazy. But when we were back at the scene that weekend, the next day, some neighbors that lived around her knew her a little bit, and said that their kids went to the same school, they went to the same bus stop, and I just happened to be outside we had this motorhome as a command post out in front of the house, while forensics was inside. We were out basically staying out of the scene, so we're not contaminating it ourselves, and waiting for them to come out and tell us kind of what they're finding. And we're doing kind of impromptu interviews with anyone we could, and it just so happened that this car drives by, and as this woman's driving by, she leans out her window and says, "Hey, is Korena okay? Are the twins okay?" And I'm thinking, twins. I was like, okay, how do you know Korena? And I'm like, and I asked her, I said, "What do you mean the twins?" And she said, "Well, yeah, she just gave birth to twins. I saw them the other day. She showed me the twins." So now, like, all kinds of red flags are going off in my head, because I'm thinking, are there other kids
babies?
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, what is going on? So I had this poor gal, I had her pull over and come into our little van there, and interviewed her for about an hour, talking about this and wondering, are there other kids out there, or other moms, or who knows? And she said that she had just been talking to Korena a few days prior, and at one point, I guess she was seeing Korena with her kids at the bus stop when this woman was also taking her kids. They would talk as mom to mom about things going on, and about her being excited about her pregnancy, and talking about making her own baby food and that sort of thing, and just like she was all for it. And she said that at one point she'd go by the house in the morning, and Korena would not be ready to take the kids to school, so this woman would end up walking Korena's kids to the bus stop, helping Korena out, knowing that she's pregnant and having a hard time. And then later that same day, that same week, the woman was walking Korena's kids back to the house, and as she was going by and letting the kids come into the house, she saw the door was open, and here's Korena sitting on the couch, and there's a twin swing, one of those baby swings you wind up, and it has 2 seats for 2 babies. She realized Korena must have had the babies, because here are these 2 babies in a swinging, and Korena's watching TV.
That is so creepy.
Yeah.
So she just had like a bundle of blankets or
this woman
something.
Said,
in
I saw the
swing.
babies. So I was like, tell me exactly what you saw. Don't assume
Not
you
the
saw
babies.
babies. Tell me exactly what you saw. She goes, well, they were dressed both in twin outfits. They were yellow. I know they were in baby clothes, but now to come to think of it, they could have been dolls. They could have been just bundles. I don't know if there was really kids there or not.
Oh my God.
So this ruse she had going on, she took it to the nth degree and had this woman believing
And
that.
purposely left the door cracked.
Right,
and-
so that this woman would
Ooh,
see her.
that's giving me the
It
heebie-jeebies.
gave me the creeps when I heard it too. But it started to make more sense than that this, I guess, story she'd been telling people. She was just completely obsessed with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more of an obsession than it was
Right.
a mental illness.
It's like a baby version of Munchausen or something.
right,
Like
similar to that. Yeah, Munchausen. Yeah.
So in her fireplace in the house and around the house were like spiral binders and just loose pieces of paper and stuff like that. And there was like stacks of them. So when the detective and I split them up and we started going through them, I'm like, call everybody that there's a number for on here. And let's see what we got. What is this? So we start reading through, and here's like a woman's name. It was 6.5 months pregnant boy. Here'd be another woman's name. 8 months pregnant, twins. And there was name after name after name after name. It was all documented out in all these different pieces of paper and stuff. It's like we need to call every one of these people and find out, do they know her? Are they her friend?
Why does she have your phone number in
Did
a
they come over to the
book of
house?
death?
What's the relationship? Yeah. Kind of when he had that weird moment when she's saying she saw, stuff in the house. I don't know who I'm calling.
Right.
So it's a very awkward conversation to begin with. And so I was trying to be as PC as I could, without being cryptic at the same time. And so I started asking one lady on the phone, and we get a couple minutes into the phone conversation, and she tells me that she's Corinna's sister. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. There's nothing on this paperwork
Right.
who denotes who you are. So, I'm sorry, about that. And she was, it was awkward for both of us.
Right.
So, she was, very, very decent about it, and
Were you able to? Did anything else come from the other phone calls? Like
there was a couple different ones. So there's a lady that lived in Wilsonville. She was 8.5 months pregnant. She got a call from a Beaverton woman who was calling from a payphone. This is about a week before the murder. The lady in Wilsonville couldn't drive because she was so pregnant. So the lady in Beaverton said, well, I'll come out. This lady was in Corinna's books.
right.
The lady from Beaverton said, well, I'm replying to your Craigslist ad about baby items. I'll come out to your house in Wilsonville, because she knew she couldn't.
Right.
The other one couldn't drive. So she's like, that's fine. You can come to my house. She said, I gave her my address. She said that the woman called later from another payphone saying that she couldn't find the address. And the woman from Wilsonville tried to give her better directions, to the Wilsonville area where she was at. And then a third call came in not long after that. It was the same Beaverton woman saying that she was borrowing a friend's cell phone and she still couldn't find the house. And so then the lady from Wilsonville said, I can meet you at a local restaurant, that might be easier. And the Beaverton woman was like, no, that's not going to work. And so the lady from Wilsonville said, here, well, my husband just got home. He's better at giving directions than I am, so you guys figure it out. And she said that after that discussion that no one ever called her back and no one ever showed up at their house.
So when you were talking to that woman, especially, did you tell her, did she know basically how lucky she was that this woman either chickened out at that time or got lost or whatever it was?
She did, and there were other women on that same day that lived even closer on the day that this happened, that had stuff on Craigslist, and they started getting calls from a Beaverton woman. Again, their numbers are in Corinna's books. And the first lady said, we were kind of going back and forth about some stuff, and I didn't want to overpay for it, so I was kind of floating her a price, like what I would be interested at. And, and she's asking me a lot of questions about like how far along I am and what I'm going to have. And she goes, so I intentionally went to one of the ladies who lived next to me in the complex and said, hey, can you start bidding on this and just kind of see what she's floating a price for you to see if I'm getting a good deal or not. And so they started working together, and they agreed to meet. And so they went to a public place to try to meet, and they saw someone driving by. They saw a lone female driving by in a vehicle similar to what Korena drove, but they didn't know who she was. They didn't know what she drove, but they recalled seeing that, and they thought it was odd that the vehicle wouldn't stop. And so they went home, and then all of a sudden the phone starts lighting up again, and it was the same woman, like, how about if I just come over to your house? And both of them said they were really uncomfortable doing that, and that
Good
was
for them.
that was the same day. So
Same day as the woman with twins,
same
or
day as the
Heather?
homicide. It was just earlier in the day,
Wow.
but it was that same day. I don't remember how many people we called. It was a lot.
Right.
Just, kind of trying to figure out, who are you? How do you know this person? And what, why is your number on here? And, it was all, it all went back to the Craigslist and the trading, and,
Right.
which is a good thing for people that, are on limited budgets and can find nice stuff. And
Just don't go to
there's-
your house.
there's, you should try to
Ever.
do the exchanges someplace safe if you can.
So, as I was saying earlier, when we were kind of trying to figure out what was Korena's state of mind, what was the motivation for this, if we could get to the bottom of that, just anything that would give us more leads about really what happened, and if there was any other victims, if there was any evidence someplace that we didn't get yet. And we were monitoring her phone calls from the jail, because all the jail phone calls are recorded.
Right.
And people know that when they get booked in, that they're being recorded. Sometimes they say things that are helpful when they don't realize it. But she was talking to her mom before she got booked, or it might have been around the time, I guess. It actually had to be after she got booked. It was the next few days. One of those early things we wanted to get done was to talk to her family, if we could, to talk to her mom. And a lot of times what happens in cases like this is people say one thing early on, but then when attorneys get a hold of them, and when the news gets a hold of them,
This is what the case is going to be.
right,
Yeah.
they start to change their tune a little bit. So we were really trying to make sure we've got a clean background on Korena and that sort of thing. And I think that's when we found out that Korena had tubal ligation. The mom even said, "Yeah, this is a miracle baby, because she had her tubes tied, and she was never going to produce a baby, so
Right.
she had to do it this way." And that whole math that people were doing was really coming to a head with people that knew her, that not only neighbors but people that were really close to her, that knew she needs to be having a baby soon. That this is
Right.
going to, her ruse is going to be up. So while monitoring her jail phone calls, and her talking to her mom, one of the other things that made me just really think is the try to reconcile what she did to the person that she is, and how she's acting, and the things that just didn't jive. And when she was talking to her mom on the jail phone call, she's, "Oh, hey mom, how's the kids doing?" Just talking very nonchalant, and
Like she's calling from vacation.
Right. At first, she's doing this really strange, like, ooh, crying, like just this weird tone of voice, and she's not really saying anything. Her mom is saying, "It's okay, hon, it's okay," and she's just doing this weird guttural crying, just fake. It sounded fake, And then that would just stop very abruptly, and then she goes, "Oh, Mom, can you go by the house? My purse is there, and I need to make sure that her daughter has her certain medication, and get my card for Safeway and do this." So she's basically reading a mom's to-do list,
Right.
a laundry list of things that she had to do at the house, because she's tied up at the jail, and and the kids are going to be needing to go to school. And she was just like a light switch went off, and that whole game she was playing just went bye-bye, and she just started
Right.
acting completely normal with her mom, and just saying, "Don't forget to pick up the milk."
That's
at the
like
grocery store."
sociopathic sounding.
Right.
To just be so dismissive of something so horrific.
Right. And for legal purposes, for court, for criminal cases, you could have someone who is diagnosed with something like being sociopathic and that sort of thing, but it's not a mental defect that would stop them from. It's a personality disorder, not a mental defect that would stop them from knowing what they were doing or aiding and assisting in their own defense. So those are the kind of the things you have to try to basically eke out early on, and otherwise it would come up later and possibly put a stop to the whole case before it really even gets started. So
With Korena having her 2 kids, did they, they were obviously really young, but one was 10 years old. Did they think mom was expecting kids? Was she known for being a good mom with her kids? What was that dynamic?
From what I remember, the kids thought they were going to have a little brother, a little sister. And when they put it in kids' terms, I'm gonna have a little brother, a little sister. I think the 6-year-old was the one that would say that. The older one, I think, knew more that something was wrong, but never really gave a complete story of mom was definitely faking this whole thing. That kid believed that mom was expecting a kid as well.
We were talking a minute ago about some of the things that were in her notes, and I mentioned it. Here's a thing. It was to the West Side Parents of Twins and Multiples meetup group, and it was posted on June 5th, 2009 by Karina Shubin, so she's taking his last name. And it says, quote, "Good morning. Looking to be a part of the community and have my children find great kids to play with. I'm a stay-home mom and expecting my first set of twins. I'm outgoing and a simple woman." End quote.
Did you feel her sending that to that group, was that in anticipation of future move to be like, I'm in this group, or was it strictly just to find?
It could have been either.
Yeah.
It could have been her trying to find somebody who had twins or was going to have twins, or just her belief that one way or the other I'm going to make this happen.
When I have twins and I need to
then I
go
can
to a
be a
parenting
part of this group. Yeah.
Oof.
So
Yuck.
And when we talked to Karina's mom, her own mom thought that she was about 6 months along. I mean, that was kind of the timetable that she had, and she believed that Korena had been seeing at least 2 different doctors, during that time, and Jan he was the father, and so you start asking follow-up questions like, well, do you know the names of the doctors? And no, and you mentioned that you think she's about 6 months along. When was she due? It's like, well, I don't know.
Ultrasound, anything.
Yeah, so same kind of thing. Like you kind of go down the path blindly, and then when people start saying, "Hey, wait a minute, something doesn't add up,"
which makes sense because
So-
that's not like you wouldn't question that.
Right,
you
right.
wouldn't be like, "Are you sure? I
Right.
should know your doctor's names." Like
yeah,
you would hope that your friend isn't making that up, or your daughter.
We went to one of the clinics that Jan said that of all the times he couldn't go, there one time he could actually go and get an update from the doctors. It was a clinic way over in North Portland, and so we went over there and followed up on it and talked to the people at the front desk there and asked about her, and they said, "Yeah, we remember her coming in here, but she was never a patient here. There was no file on her here." And she went so far as to have Jan go up to the desk with her. She talked to the receptionist, had an argument with the receptionist about, well, I'm supposed to have my appointment today, and she's like, "We have no record of that." And it must have been a mistake. It must have been I missed my appointment, or I just mixed up the days. So she put on this whole show for Jan, and basically went to a clinic knowing she's never been there before, and just
Sorry for the technical term, ballsy.
Yeah,
like
right.
to go. I'm like Casey Anthony walking at Universal Studios to the end of the hallway. It's like, how do you go that far when you know it doesn't exist?
She even went to a doctor's appointment. This might have been before she claimed to be pregnant. We know that she had claimed to be pregnant once before at least. And she had a doctor's visit where she had Jan come pick her up. She said she was having a miscarriage, that she had a miscarriage, and then she needed him to come pick her up. She was distraught, which any mom having a miscarriage would be super distraught. And so he went there and did the right thing and went to go pick her up. And by the time he got there, she was already out in the waiting room waiting for him, and he never got to talk to the doctor, never got to find out what really happened. He believed her whole story. And then when we ended up finding out later from looking at medical records, she went in for basically a stomach ache. So she actually did go into the hospital and talk to someone, but didn't claim to be pregnant to the doctors or to the medical
and
personnel.
him coming with a TBI, going, okay,
Yep,
sounds
exactly.
good.
Yeah.
So on the date of the homicide, emergency responders were first called, I think, at 2:42. I think is what I said earlier.
Yeah.
The two deals that fell through that day, the first one fell through at 10:45 a.m. and the second one fell through at 1:30.
Whoa.
And an hour and 12 minutes later, police or EMS was responding to that house.
Wow.
It was,
She was that was the day.
yeah.
And
And
she
interesting,
even
the
took-
10 o'clock one, the 10 o'clock one, because he said how he came home at 11 for lunch and it was all
Exactly. That's
normal
what I
like
was
every
gonna
other
say.
day. I wonder if that was part of the plan of like, oh, I'll do it and then he'll come home for lunch and I'll be perfect.
Ultimately, Corinna was charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of murder, and 2 counts of first-degree robbery based on different theories of the case. And she subsequently pled guilty to 1 count of aggravated murder and agreed to a life in prison without the chance of parole. Actually, at sentencing, the judge, Judge Letourneau, asked Corinna, are you pleading guilty because you believe you are guilty? And Corinna said, quote, I am taking responsibility because I am guilty, end quote. They asked Chris Pop if he wanted to say something, and he said to Corinna, he said, you've taken away my fiance and my son. I don't know what to say to you. And it was, I think everybody was thankful that there was a plea in the case and that, we didn't have to go through a trial, right? I think that in the end, the types of cases that we worked on, you get to the end of the road, and the bottom line is it's about holding people accountable. It's about the victims, and it's about finding the people who did it, and making sure that they get held accountable for what they did. So anyhow, it was a very, very unique case. And,
What words did you end up with for Corinna? Your descriptive word.
I think for me it was she was obsessed. She came up with a plan. She got very focused on that plan and was doing everything that she could to implement it. She was savvy enough, a trusting enough person to other people that some of them just didn't think about it. It's like they weren't thinking that, wow, she should have had the baby like a month ago, and then 2 months ago, and then 3 months ago, and and she's still acting as though she is pregnant, and so I think that was probably tough for a lot of people, when everything happened, and
deception.
Because then it was like, wait a minute, how did I not see that? How did that not ring true?
You can't do anything to help the victims in these cases. You can only help the families, and that's really who we work for when we do the job. It's hopefully to get someone who's dangerous off the street.
Right.
But in reality, it's to get at least some way for the family to deal with the aftermath. You hear that the cliche word of closure all the time, and it's people that are in this situation will tell you there's no such thing as closure, and it's really just all about bringing the story to an end. And even if it's not a good ending, at least it's coming to an end in some way, as far as catching the person that's responsible and hopefully finding out at least somewhat why. People want to know why. And it doesn't take you don't have to have that prong of motive to prove a murder case in Oregon. You don't have to prove the why, but we try to. We
Right.
try to get to, a lot of times the why answers the how, but in this case it was, just like he said, she's obsessed, and she just became so driven to have a baby. But it's hard to imagine someone who already has 2 kids that are well into their childhood, and it is almost a form of Munchausen in that respect, because it's the attention of being pregnant and being treated with kid gloves, or getting special
Right.
treatment because you're pregnant, and
Letting
the
someone
attention
walk
you
your
get
kids
from-
to the bus
right,
because you're busy with
exactly.
the twins.
So that's kind of how I, pretty much figured she was doing this all, one, to keep Jan and to kind of keep things going that way, that stability, but also to get all the different things that she wanted, and she had to keep the ruse going, and eventually it got to the point where she had to produce a baby. And
Right.
the only way she was going to save face was to have this baby, and she clearly didn't give any thought to the second one that we know of, or how this was going to go in 10 years from now when she's got this baby. She couldn't even think a day ahead, and what to do with Heather when she was done.
And looking at Heather's life, it's like, yeah, you can say, oh, she was a victim and it's this horrific thing, but it's also like, because of her, like, laws are changed and people think about these things. So who knows how many people she's actually been able to help because of it.
That could really be said for police work in general. Really, we've gone, both of us, through 20-some years of service with the sheriff's office, and just the calls that we dealt with all since we were patrol deputies, and the things you do every day, the day-to-day things you do in the job, you may not realize what effect that has down the road. You may not see that it had this certain outcome,
Right.
but the butterfly effect, as you hear people say, and how that could have changed someone's life in a good direction. Even putting someone in prison for a while,
Oh, yeah.
may change their life for the better. And may save someone, like a domestic violence victim, separating that suspect trying to break this.
Yeah, or getting away from drugs, or getting away from the neighborhood, or anything like that.
So yeah, that's where the satisfaction comes with this job, because it's also very frustrating when there's not much you can do to prevent this kind of thing.
Yeah, you're coming
How
at
do you
the
know?
aftermath.
Yeah, what could you possibly have done differently to, other than you tell people be careful when you're on Craigslist. But the thing is, if someone wants to do it, they're going to find a way. They always do.
Chris Pop, Heather Snively's fiance, do we know where he ended up?
I spoke to him a few times in the years after. I actually ran into him at a sportsman show once, and we talked for a while, and he was living with this, as best he can, and moving on with his life. And if there's anything happy that came out of it, I know he did become a father and got married. And,
Oh, good.
and I had kind of lost track of him after that. But
Right.
he certainly did, eventually move on.
Well, I would like to thank you guys again so much for your time and so much information. Watching your program and reading police reports and stuff, you only get so much information. So I really appreciate it. On a personal note, I had my first encounter with a deceased body last week. I work in a residential facility, and it kind of shook me more than I anticipated, and it really heightened my already respect for what you guys deal with on a day-to-day basis. So thank you so much for your time tonight, for all your time that you've given our communities, and all of your hard work putting away the bad guys.
Well, thanks for your interest in this case. It was very unique.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. That's it. Murder in the Rain is produced and edited by Josh McCullough. Written and hosted by Emily Rowney and Alisha Holland. Artwork by Jamie Costa. Music by Kai Pfeiffer at kyfifer.com. Check out our website, murderintherain.com, for additional information on all cases, a fun interactive map, and be sure to subscribe so you can receive our newsletter. Check out the Mad Props page for coupon codes from some of our sponsors. We love your reviews and seeing them on all streaming platforms, especially iTunes. And check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And suck my balls.
Please put that in.
Do you need a sip of water, maybe? You just ate a bunch of Doritos. You want to clear out the...
I was doing that on purpose because we're about to record.
Okay, I know. I was just
twat.
No, it's just suggesting it.
You're serious.
There's nothing wrong with sipping water. I don't think I've ever seen you actually drink water. Are you one of those aliens from Signs?
One moment. Wait a minute. There's going to be a murder? In the rain?
There's a difference.
I know there is.
There's a difference.
What are your remaining questions? Because I cannot read that writing.
I'm so sorry. Do you know what happened with Jan? Like, he was so duped, and he had to feel...
You have to ask me so I can ask it, because I can't say, that's my mom in the background. But I'm going to have to, because you're the most reactive person.
Well, she's probably asking what your fans would ask too. Like, I want to know this.
Because I didn't. I was like, what if I totally spaced? I was really nervous to meet you guys because I get pulled over sometimes.
Did you want to ask if the two kids stayed together?
Well, I have to because you just literally spoke so loudly. Oh, okay. So the two kids stayed together. Josh can edit it all together. It's fine. That's his job.
Hey true crime fans, have you listened to Wine and Crime yet?
We're a true crime comedy podcast hosted by three childhood friends who chug wine, chat true crime, and unleash our worst Minnesotan accents.
Each week, us gals pick a true crime topic and pair it with a delicious wine before delving into the background and psychology behind the crime.
Then we share and speculate wildly about a couple of bonkers cases related to the topic.
Past episodes include necrophilia, cults, crimes of passion, cruise ship disappearances, exorcisms gone wrong, all this over a bottle of wine, or, let's be real, 3.
Listen anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Wine and Crime Pod, and check out our website and blog at wineandcrimepodcast.com.
Cheers!